Paul Schroder, welcome to 7:30.
Well, thanks for having me.
There's usually plenty of cynicism in the lead up to an event staged by the government like this. How did you find it in reality?
Oh, I found it better than maybe I was expecting. If you did read what was coming, in the days before, you might have thought something else. But I just stood back and thought there wouldn't be too many places in the world where a treasurer could bring together all that many different voices and thoughts, and everybody in the room was trying to do something better for Australia. I think they should be commended for doing it.
Now, your session was on attracting capital to Australia, but more than half your projects, your investments are overseas, including in stock markets and foreign infrastructure projects. What would make you invest more money in Australia?
Well, my main job is to make all of the members of Australian Super richer in retirement. So we need to have a globally diversified portfolio to make all of them the most money for their retirement. So we have to be both in Australia and rest of the globe as well. What we were really saying today was, with more policy certainty and with much quicker decision making by regulators and an alignment between investors and government, you could do more and you could do it more quickly.
So specifically, what were you asking the government to consider today?
Yeah, well, first of all, I was reminding them that we need to make people the most risk-adjusted money post-tax and fees for everybody's future retirement. That's the first thing that we were saying. And the second is that politics is not usually that well suited to the long-term issues that we're thinking about. And it's really important that all sides of politics and all of the key players understand that most of the things we're talking about are long-term, nation-building, problem-solving things like housing and the like. They're going to take a sustained effort from across the whole community.
So in terms of changing the balance of Australian Super from its very large overseas portfolio to one with a bigger portfolio in Australia, what specifically would need to change in the way investments are put together in Australia?
Yeah, you shouldn't miss the fact that we invest in about $97 billion worth of Australian equities today and about $30 billion of Australian infrastructure. So we're a very, very significant investor in Australian companies and in Australian jobs. But what we were really saying was there are plenty of great opportunities here in Australia to tackle the big things that people need tackled that will deliver a proper return for the members of the fund. That's really what we were putting today.
And what are those things? What would need to change to make you able, in your view, to invest more money in Australia?
Yeah. Well, the sort of things that need to change are, we need to be in a situation where governments of all tiers can make decisions more quickly, whether that's a yes or a no, knowing that's really important. Having the right settings about the long term is really important as well. And I think, for example, housing, which is really a supply problem, and we have a massive housing problem. It's possibly one of the most stressful things that's happening for most households today. We have an enormous housing problem, and that's going to require supply.
Now, you have a small investment in housing in Australia. I think it's a project with about 1,400 homes under the government's, I always have to check this one, build to rent to buy scheme. What incentives do you need to make your investment in Australian housing bigger, specifically?
Well, I'll give you a very straightforward example. If the approval process for a dwelling that's in one particular unit takes an extra week, it costs about $1,000 to the cost of the dwelling. So $1,000 a week in slow approvals. The single most important thing the government could do is to say, at all levels of government, we're going to make it much easier and much more clear-cut. First thing was to say we need to build supply. Now we need to just make sure we get on with the job.
Is the issue here that you don't have a big enough risk appetite for investing in Australia?
No, Australia is a very stable, very, very thoughtful economy and has plenty of opportunities. As I mentioned, we invest very heavily in Australia, but it's important too that we diversify the portfolio.
But if it's so good, why don't you invest more of Australian superannuation funds in Australia? I know you invest a lot, but if it's as good as you say, why not more?
Oh, I think it's the other way around. I think if you think about it, Australia represents about 2% of global equity markets. So you might say the other way around, say why wouldn't we be investing less to have a global balance? Well, the reason for that is we're very committed to the Australian economy and Australian jobs.
For example, what if the government were to mandate put a mandate on you to invest more in Australia, a 5% mandate, as people have raised. Could that work?
Oh, the single worst disaster that anybody could do would be to have a government step in and make investment decisions for funds. Individual members of the fund, they carry the investment risk here, and so they need to be able to choose their fund and they need to be able to choose their investment strategy. It would genuinely be a disaster if government reached in and said something about that.
But isn't the problem here, one of the fundamental problems in Australia, that the economy is not diverse enough? We're obviously so heavily invested in mining. We need more investment in research and development. Shouldn't big funds like yours be playing a major role in bringing on that research and development?
Yes, and I think you've just touched on some of the things that were discussed today in the room. It's not a diversified enough economy. You know, we're great at mining and we're big at resources, but we need more. And one of the things that was talked about in the room today, for example, was data centres and how can we become much a bigger part of that digital revolution. And a fund like ours and many others are very excited about investing in that sphere.
Now, I just want to ask you about the government's proposed tax on super balances over $3 million, one of the policies that they took to the election. The Treasurer doesn't want to index the cap on tax concessions. Is he wrong about that?
Well, the first principle here is that we accept that the tax benefits of super disproportionately go to the wealthy. So as a general proposition, could the tax settings be rebalanced to give a better go for people who are less well off? We think the answer to that is yes. So the $3 million tax idea, broadly seems like a reasonable number, but it should be indexed. And the reason it should be indexed is because we're in the business of making people richer in retirement. We want everyone to have more money. And so if you don't index it, eventually people get caught by it. So, yeah, we do think it should be indexed, but the general direction is a good one.
But that's not just because you want to drive people out of self-managed super funds?
Oh, the complete reverse. It's really good for us and very important for us that there's a robust and strong self-managed super fund system as a sector. And the great part about this whole system is it's underpinned by choice and competition, and everybody can just about choose their own adventure. And we think that's in the interest of members everywhere.
Now, at the beginning of this year, with the arrival of the new Trump administration, you were celebrating the state and the potential of the US economy. Are you still 100% confident in Donald Trump's handling of the US economy?
Yeah, well, I never said we were 100% anything, because this is a risk-adjusted business and we get compensated for the risk that we take.
But you were celebrating the glories of the American economy.
No, that's true. There is truly American exceptionalism and they have been a brilliant place to make money over the last century.
And now?
I think what we're seeing is a little bit more policy uncertainty drifting in, and it's really important for investors to have long-term confidence about policy settings.
Paul Schroder, we'll follow the rest of the roundtable with interest, but thank you very much for joining us today.
And thank you.
And now to our political editor, Jacob Greber, who's also, well, he wasn't at the roundtable, but he's been watching the discussions in Canberra closely today. I want to start with the important question about seating, like a wedding, or who sits where matters at a roundtable. Who got the top seats?
Well, we weren't in there, Sarah, but I was peering through that frosted glass window with everyone else in the gallery. We couldn't see much. There were some interesting seating choices. You had them all around that well-known oval-shaped table. It's not round at all. In fact, that's fake news. But Ted O'Brien, the opposition leader, was in that part of the table where the Treasurer could probably barely see him, tucked away off to the left in the corner, which is, quite amusing.
Now, one of the things that came out in I think in one of the breaks was that the union movement had Sally McManus is in there along with another member of the ACTU, was asking for bosses to pay a levy to be put on companies to train workers. That was quite a big thing for them to go for today, wasn't it?
And actually, most of the day, we kept hearing there was a lot of common ground, a lot of agreement, a lot of consensus. This was the one thing where there was a bit of a blue, I'm told, by participants. The union wanting that levy put on the larger employers in particular. Their argument is that training has declined over the last few years and decades, and that this needs to be a reset. Business and the employer groups in the room were having none of it and pushed back very, very firmly on that. So that's unlikely to be one of the areas where there's a great deal of progress. But there were other places where they were agreeing, particularly on the recognition of qualifications for people both coming to Australia and moving around Australia. Very important productivity reform that's about making the labour market more flexible.
Does that reform challenge the union movement, though, at the same time? Because clearly, though, Australians would be in competition for those jobs?
So their view, and I did check this with them after the session was over, is that they're up for a discussion on that point. They actually say there's an awful lot of migrants who are in jobs for which they're they're actually overqualified for them, and that they could be moved up the skill scale. So sounds like there's an openness there that the government will want to use, and business is very keen to use as well.
Now, there was also some mention today of the NDIS. We heard, I think, in the break at lunchtime on the ABC from Daniel Mookhey, the New South Wales Treasurer. So what's brewing on the NDIS?
Well, he sort of made the point that the growth in that particular spending item, and it's very, very large, it's outpacing really just about everything else other than interest payment costs for the Commonwealth, have to be brought under control, and the government does have a target to bring it down to 8% growth. It's currently 10 or 11% a year. And one of the ways they're doing that, the federal government has to get the states on board. The states are taking on some responsibility for some of the other elements of the scheme, the foundational supports. And it's going to be very interesting tomorrow, Sarah. Mark Butler, the Health Minister, is giving a speech at the National Press Club. And we're all being told to watch that space very carefully. And
just before you go, Jacob, I want to just ask you about about this incident with the Israelis who cancelled representation for Australians in the Palestinian Authority. Benjamin Netanyahu has responded with a strongly worded post on X attacking Albanese for being a weak politician. What's this about? Who's at the core of this? What's going on here? So there's obviously been a very strong reaction to a visa that was rejected, or an application that was rejected, for Simcha Rothman, who's a far-right Israeli politician. That then resulted in the visa being cancelled for two of our diplomatic representatives who deal with the Palestinian Authority. And then, as you said, this quite extraordinary reaction from Netanyahu against Anthony Albanese, quite personal, quite sort of loud tweet, if you like, if there is such a thing. The view inside the government is he has done this to other world leaders, particularly Keir Starmer and Mark Carney, the Canadian and British Prime Ministers. He's had the same kind of, reaction on Twitter to the very same issue which we're talking about here, which is Palestinian statehood, recognition of it. And so the view in the government is this seems to be an emotional and over-the-top reaction from the Israeli government, both Netanyahu and on the visas. And it's a sign, they say, of the pressure that they are under from around the world at the moment. That's really starting to play on them, and they're lashing out. And frankly, once you go to that level of, I guess, diplomatic aggression in your language and your actions, where else do you go? And there are concerns in the Jewish community that they need to bring the tone down. There are long-term relationships, both in the communities and in business and in a whole lot of other areas of cooperation. And people are worried that this has now gone too far. Jacob, on that and also on the issue of the roundtable, which of course continues tomorrow and Thursday, thank you very much.
Thanks very much.